Hey woodworkers, I'm ready to apply some finish onto this material. So this is a sample board. I would recommend strongly that everybody get in the habit of making these things. That's the only way you're really going to know what finishes you like, what looks good compared to another on the same species of wood, especially if you're making a project. You don't want to just start blindly throwing finish onto that project. You really have to test it out to know what it's all about. So closed poured wood. This is Douglas fir. I just sanded it. I've used the corners. I brushed it off once before, but actually a couple times before. But right before I get into the finishing process, I like to really give it one final coat, or one final clear. All right, so this one feels good. I need to protect this and keep it there. All right, this is the brush I'm going to be using for the finish application. Because I'm going to be using polyurethane, I want to introduce the bristles of this brush into a little bit of the solvent. So mineral spirits in here, that's going to sit over there for just a second. That will allow the solvent to come up into this area here, so that if any finish comes up afterwards, it's going to be so much easier to clear it or clean it out after the fact. And that's probably all I need to do. I probably don't need to soak it there longer, but I need to get into what we're doing. Okay, so for application of polyurethane, I need to have a couple things. I need to have mixing containers or measuring containers, ideally both. I need to make sure that I have a compatible polyurethane. This one refers to as a spar urethane, but water-based. So if I use this in mixture with the mineral spirits, that's going to be a good day to ruin my day, certainly ruin my finish. So getting rid of that one. Then I have my oil-based polyurethane here. A couple of tips on this stuff. Off camera I have my eye protection on. A couple of tips on this stuff while I get geared up is that we need to loosen up all of the drying agents and the flattening agents for this finish. This is a satin finish, and so most finishes, polyurethanes especially, have they come right out of the gates with a high gloss finish, and they have to mix chemical flatteners to them or into them to make them duller. So I need to mix these things up, which is what I'm doing. I really can't do this with the lid on and shaking it, because that introduces a ton of air bubbles, and it would be more fun to shake it, but I really don't want to get into a situation where I'm introducing more bubbles than I really need. What you can't see here is this stuff smells horrible, which is usually your body's way of saying we probably shouldn't be breathing this stuff in. What I did off camera is that I have a window open, so that's at least enabling me to quasi-safely make this video while I'm applying this finish. All right, so you can feel it starting to loosen up, so it's not so difficult to agitate. With whatever finish you choose, you need to do some research on what the solid contents are for your finish. And so this one has the highest rating that I could find. It's 50.6% solid contents, which might not mean anything until you use a inferior or a cheaper finish, and then you'll start to realize, oh, that might have something to do with it. And this could be the oldest woodworkery thing that I've done, like old-timey woodworkery thing, is just grab a stick and start mixing this stuff. But I do that from time to time. All right, the other thing that I'm doing is I'm mixing all this on my trusty finishing board. I've mixed a lot of finishes here, applied a lot of finishes, spilled a lot of finishes, so I'm on this. I don't want to be doing this directly on my workbench or another thing that could also kind of ruin my day. So I have measurements here, and for the size of this board that I'm after, this is way overkill. So if I'm going to go 1:1, that's what I want to do. So I'm going to go to there. Okay, sorry. So first application of polyurethanes typically are going to be a 50% mixture of your polyurethane and your solvent. And so I need to be able to mix these two together in the right ratio. Not terribly critical that it's right on the money. It's not like an epoxy or even a conversion varnish, where if you get the ratio incorrect, it's going to throw off either your dry time or your hardness or even cracking and other issues. So anyway, so just a 1:1. I'm going to try to do my best. And I've got 2 containers here to do this. The thing that I want to show is how I pour this out. So I'm going to start with the solvent first. I'm going to do it so I can read my numbers. There we are. And you'll notice that I'm pouring this the correct way. There's the right way, which is, well, it's always, everybody always thinks the way they do it is right. But the right way here is pour it this way. If I were to pour it this way or this way, it starts to get those really inconsistent sputters as this thing is coming out. So I'm pouring this stuff upside down, or the right way, but it looks upside down. Now the next step, I'll mix into a separate container just in case I over pour. I could dump out a little bit of extra here, and then I'll mix these together. Now, on the theme of ruining one's day, if I were to take this, which was crazy full, this is a brand new can, and I were to hope and pray that I can get this thing in without having it drip down the side and spill over this bench, speaking from experience, that just never works for me. If you have better experience with that, please let me know. I'm going to kind of post up here and then put this in a way that I think allows me to control this much better. And it makes fun noises too. I would encourage everybody to not take this back to the kitchen after you're done mixing things, your finishes. Almost there. So if I'm off on the ratio here at all, it really is not critical for the first coat especially, that's all. What it will translate to is either a finish that is very, very thin, and it's not as much in the way of your polyurethane material, or something that's going to dry much slower than this ratio would allow for, just because there's more of the polyurethane and less of the solvent. So either way, I'm really not stressed about how that's going to play out. All right. So I've got my ratio here 1:1, which is great. I've gotten into the habit of pouring the solvent into the other container instead of vice versa. It seems like the solvent has less viscosity and it just empties itself into this new container. That one is pretty much spotless now at this point. All right, same rules. I'm stirring, I am not shaking. All right, so this stuff is way thinner than as I started, which is exactly what I wanted. Okay, so while it's there, I have my brush. I need to remove the excess. I should do it here because it's fun to watch. You probably won't be able to see that. And then my buddy Bob Ross had that great trick about drying those things off, which is what I did. Okay, so if I need to set this finish out until the next time for me to reapply, these containers you can purchase lids with as well. Be careful about introducing, let me rephrase it. Be careful about trusting a lid on top of where your solvents were, because this will start to solidify and build up this waxy substance, which is not going to help in your finish. or your life, especially if you have a brush inside of there. So, so the lid I will use on this for when it's time to reapply, or if I have a larger surface, then I'll be able to get in there tomorrow, the next day, no problem. It's a long-term storage thing. I would use one of these containers, and then that way you can seal it up like what they did and have this thing store well. All right, good. So I hope that this is helpful. What I want to do is see if I can really show off what I'm up to here. The raking light that I installed behind here was for that very reason, to be able to see. And this is kind of the perfect vantage point, I think, for being able to see any areas or highlights that are not being covered by finish. Yeah, much better. All right, so nope, I'm maxed out. Okay. All right, polyurethane, as I mentioned, I want to spread these things out for two reasons. I need to have the most stable foundation of this thing as possible. If I were to not have these and just set it onto whatever, this is inevitably going to drip, and then it's going to adhere itself to whatever your finishing board is, or your finishing surface is. This will allow me to catch some of those drips and wipe them off on the edges should I need to. All right, so a couple of things to consider. Without fail, I think everybody, when they start applying polyurethane, especially out of a can, is that they will lift up this material and then they'll drag it across the sides as they do. And in doing that, you start to flex these bristles and introduce some air bubbles there. And the air bubbles collect around the polyurethane, and then they start to full or draw out as you're applying this material. So if you ever have air bubbles on your surfaces, it's because you're scraping the bottom or the sides of the container. So I'm gonna lift straight out, drip, 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 which is fine. And then I'll start to broadcast this. The other thing about my my pattern for applying the finish is I have to avoid scraping this off of any type of a corner. So a transition of a horizontal to a vertical space. If I do this, it's just going to be sags and drips all over, and it's no fun to clean up. It will go away. It's just a lot more sanding, and it clogs the pores of your sandpaper rapidly. Sometimes you can get in there with a very sharp chisel or a card scraper or something, but a better way to do it is starting in the center, going out to the sides, center, out to the sides, and doing it that way, which is what I'm going to do. All right, so picking up some material and then laying this stuff down. The temptation, I think, for every woodworker when applying finish is to go a little bit thicker than the product really wants to be applied. Our mantra when finishing has always got to be lots of thin coats is better than one heavy coat. All right, so I'm working on that talking and doing something thing. All right, that looks pretty good. I've got a couple of, so for the most part, this finish is distributed fairly evenly. I've got a couple of nasty little buggers in there, and I can't quite tell if that is some foreign material on the brush, or if it is something trapped inside of the finish. But I'm going to coat the edges here lightly. I haven't reapplied any finishes to the edges. This is such a small surface that I just want to make sure that this gets covered, but not soaking wet. Gravity is not your friend in this application here. Which reminds me, if you're using polyurethane, you really have to apply the finish in multiple coats where the wood or the broadest section of this material is horizontal. So if this were a table, I would remove the tabletop and hit one face of the table, and then I would work on the legs, maybe laying on its side, hit one surface and then a lower surface, but all on the top of whatever the board is doing. And that way gravity, I'm not fighting. Because this product dries so incredibly slowly, which is one of the big benefits of polyurethane, it's always going to collect in areas that are not placed horizontally. We talked about the vertical surfaces, but even here, if I'm resting this and it has a small angle to it, all of that material will start to pull, or pool, I should say, into that low spot. So being careful or cautious there. The thing I'm doing here is I'm kind of like doing a touchdown for when people get pilot's license, or so I'm told. I want to miss this back corner, slowly grab here, and then go all the way through, and then I'll lift it back up again. And then do the same from the other side. Yeah, I think I know what I did here. I have one little stinker right here. So in order to remove that, I'm going to just come in here with this, pull that material off of the bristles, and then do this, and it's like the whole thing never happened. There's a lot of other little foreign stinkers that I hate for what it is I'm doing, but that's probably the best I can do. In your shop, well, if you're considering setting up your shop, strongly encourage you to factor in at least 300 square feet of what will be undisturbed finishing, dedicated finishing area. Because the worst thing you could possibly do for finishing, minus not sanding properly, and mixing, and all the things we've talked about so far, worst thing you could do is sand in the same environment and then shortly after start throwing down finish, which is the curse of every woodworker. So careful of that, but okay, I think I'm rambling on now. Hopefully that was, oh, you can't see anything, can you? Well, I was hoping that you would get a better sense of the gloss of this thing. Yeah, kind of in a dead zone here as far as light and grain, but we want it wet all the way across. If there's any dry spots, I'll need to deal with that. And looks like I have. So at this point, I think I'm going to sign off. Nope, I lied. So briefly, what I'm hoping to do with mixing this 50-50. I could go 100% out of the can of polyurethane, apply that, but it's going to dry twice as slow as if I were to mix it 50-50. The other thing is that it is thinner now because we added the solvent, so it'll lay out flatter and get into all these areas and give us a nice foundation for our finishes. It's not going to be the same with successive coats. With successive coats, I need to do some scuff sanding once this is dry. Because this has been mixed, that dry time decreases. For a fast dry polyurethane, this is going to be maybe a 3-hour situation. If it's one of these, it's a overnight usually. And so always play it safe. Leave this overnight. Don't make any more dust or whatever, because that's going to make this, it's going to magically find its way on top of your board. Every small particle of dust, even from just walking around a dusty shop, is going to find its way here. So, so I'm cutting down the curing time of this, and I'm also allowing the solid particles that I have here to kind of lay out in a more even and consistent way. And then once that happens, the next coat, after I sand with 320 grit or 420 grit, for this it's usually 320 because it's a lot of solid or high solid mixture. Then I'll clean that off and then reapply either straight out of the can, 100% polyurethane, or 75%, 25%, so 3 parts poly, 1 part mineral spirits. And then the last coat, be either 3 or 4 coats, will be 100% right out of the can. And you have to sand in between every single coat, but that's the practice. So first coat, as I mentioned, just laying this down, giving us something that will absorb evenly, so the next coat will have a nice surface that's consistent, that's even and smooth for us to really throw on whatever is going to be next. Okay, I'm officially done. Good luck with your finishing, everybody. Thank you.